Boys and girls, the title of this lesson is Summary Boot Camp. And if you can remember when we had boot camp and writer's workshop, we really spent a lot of time analyzing and looking and coaching. I spent some time coaching you. And so this is not really a traditional short lesson that you can then go right ahead and apply, but it's more of a guided practice. And I wanted to start by talking to you about the standard that we're working on. And this standard is aligned with the question on the pretest that asked you to write a summary. And I noticed that when you were asked to write a summary, a lot of you became paralyzed. You didn't really know what was expected of you. Now, since the beginning of the unit, we have learned several strategies on how to take notes and determine the main idea. Remember that one of the early lessons that we had, we used the text structure to determine what was important in the text and what notes to pay attention to. Later, we learned to code the text, knowing when the writer lapsed into a more narrative style of writing and when they went back to expository to provide us with facts and details. Well, today we're going to put all of that together, and we're going to be working on writing a summary. Now, I want to remind you of our learning progression, what writing a summary looks like in each grade. Now, last year, for third grade, you learned how to write about main ideas, okay, and then the details that they supported. Your teacher may have taught you how to use your hand to teach somebody. The main idea was the center, your palm, the main idea, and then each finger was a detail that supported it. So when you're reading nonfiction and you want to know what kind of notes to take, you want to apply identifying the text structure, and then we want to determine what the important details are and the main idea. What is the author saying about this topic? Now, fourth grade, you kind of have to ramp it up a little bit. You still write about the main ideas. You still write down the details that support it. But now you have to use the text structure you identified in the writing when you're writing your summary. Okay, I think that's what really kind of stumped a lot of you when you were asked to do that. So you're already going to know what the text structure is, because that's how you're going to determine how to take your notes. And then you're going to write in that style. Now, one of the things that you can use, and I hope you remember to use it, is the chart that we have in our green packet that talks about the different types of text structure. And if you look at that, we know that when we're identifying text structure, we not only consider the content, but we consider the keywords and phrases that are used. For example, sequential or chronological order has first, second, next, then. Problem solution has words like therefore, because of, consequently. When you're doing compare and contrast, you have different, unlike, alike, similar, cause and effect, as a result, therefore. And then for descriptive, you have for example, in addition to, specifically, in particular. So if you identify the text structure, when you go to write your summary, those are going to be some of the words that you can use to frame your summary. So knowing text structure and being able to use what you know about text structure when you're writing your summary is going to be very helpful. Okay, so today what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at part of our Everything Weather book that we're using. And we're going to look at a specific section in there called Here Comes the Sun. I will display it under the document camera, but I'm also going to read it out loud. Now, as I'm reading it, remember what your job is. Your job is to identify the text structure. So you're going to want to listen very carefully. Picture what is happening. Let's make sure I can get this to get off of the glare. And you're going to want to try to determine, first of all, the text structure, and then what is the author saying? What is this mainly about? Here comes the sun. The sun is Earth's 5 billion year old friend. How hot is it? Really hot. The sun has a core of gases that reaches a temperature of 27 million degrees Fahrenheit or 15 million degrees Celsius. Here on Earth, we are 93 million miles, 150 million kilometers, away from the sun, but that's still close enough to feel the burn. The sun provides most of the heat and light for the planet, but it is not the only factor in the weather. All those millions of miles from the sun, our planet spins on an axis. The rotation causes moving air to change direction. Add more movement to air that is rising, falling, and changing temperatures, and you end up with a wild weather ride. When it comes to causing weather, the sun, land, and air are partners. The sun heats large patches of land which warm the air above them. The wind then moves the warm air around, sometimes bumping cooler patches out of the way. The air's constant shifting, rising, falling, heating, and cooling make the weather very unpredictable. Okay, so what do you think is the text structure of this section? Amelia, what do you think? So you think it's descriptive? So you saw words like, for example, in addition, specifically. Did you see words like that? It sure does describe it, but that's not the text structure. Anybody else? You want to take a risk there, Caroline? What do you think? Cause and effect. Great job. Okay. Remember, when it's cause and effect, we're going to see words like as a result, therefore, because of, due to. Okay. And if you go back in the text over here, when it comes to causing weather, can you see that? The rotation causes moving air to change direction. All right? So can you see how it's cause and effect? Does that help, Amelia? Okay. So now you know that the text structure is cause and effect. I'm going to read this again, but this time when I read it, I want you to write down notes. In your notebook, write down what you think is important based on the text structure that we have identified. If the text structure is cause and effect, you're going to be taking notes about causes and effects. All right, so let's go. Here comes the sun. The sun is Earth's 5 billion year old friend. How hot is it? Really hot. The sun has a core of gases that reaches a temperature of 27 million degrees Fahrenheit or 15 million degrees Celsius. Here on Earth, we are 93 million miles, 150 million kilometers away from the sun, but that's still close enough to feel the burn. The sun provides most of the heat and light for the planet, but it is not the only factor in the weather. All those millions of miles from the sun, our planet spins on an axis. The rotation causes moving air to change direction. Add more movement to air that is rising, falling, and changing temperatures, and you end up with a wild weather ride. When it comes to causing weather, the sun, land, and air are partners. The sun heats large patches of land, which warm the air above them. The wind then moves the warm air around, sometimes bumping cooler patches out of the way. The air's constant shifting, rising, falling, heating, and cooling make the weather very unpredictable. Eli, tell me something you wrote down as one of your notes that you took from this section. Say that again. So you wrote down that you feel the heat of the sun, even though we're so far away. Okay. Anybody else? Fiona, what's something that you wrote? All right, I'm going to have to get closer because I can't hear you. I'm sorry. Go ahead again. Okay, the sun has a core of gas. It's really hot. Okay, so let me stop you for a second. We identified the text structure as cause and effect. Okay, thinking about those notes that you took, which certainly were in there. It's not that it wasn't in there. How does that play into cause and effect? How does that play? How does that work together? It does. It works together. But how? Levi?
The cause is that the sun's so hot, and the effect is that it gives them a lantern, gives heat to the earth.
Okay, so we could say because the sun is so hot, we can still feel its burn even though we are so far away. Can you see how it goes together, Fiona and Eli? Because the sun is so hot, and we can even say because the sun is 27 million degrees Fahrenheit, we feel the burn here on Earth even though we are 93 million miles away from it. And because we're reading a scientific text, we want to make sure that we're using the vocabulary and we're quoting the facts. All right? So, did everybody write that down? Did everybody write that down? Because the sun has a temperature of 27 million degrees Fahrenheit, we can still feel its heat even though we are 93 million miles away from it. So that's how we frame our notes around this text structure that we have identified. Okay, so let's look at the second paragraph. All those millions of miles from the sun, our planet spins on an axis. The rotation causes moving air to change direction. Add more movement to air that is rising, falling, and changing temperatures, and you end up with a wild weather ride. Thinking about our text structure, what can you write? Amelia? Okay, the planet spins on an axis causing changes in, well, it's really not talking about the weather here. What is it talking specifically about? Causing changes in the, let me read it again because you might not be able to see it. All those millions of miles from the sun, our planet spins on an axis. The rotation causes moving air to change direction. Add more movement to air that is rising, falling, and changing temperatures, and you end up with a wild weather rhyme. Right. So the rotation of the Earth on its axis causes the air to move in different ways. And then you could say that this creates changes in the weather, or it says wild weather here, but so far you've already started writing your summary. You've already framed some of your summary. Let me read the last paragraph. When it comes to causing weather, the sun, land, and air are partners. The sun heats large patches of land, which warm the air above them. The wind then moves the warm air around, sometimes bumping cooler patches out of the way. The air's constant shifting, rising, falling, heating, and cooling make the weather very unpredictable. Go ahead and form what you would put down there. Frame it with our text structure, how you would take notes to summarize that last part. I'll read it one more time. When it comes to causing weather, the sun, land, and air are partners. The sun heats large patches of land which warm the air above them. The wind then moves the warm air around, sometimes bumping cooler patches out of the way. The air's constant shifting, rising, falling, heating, and cooling make the weather very unpredictable. Now, what we've done is we've identified the text structure, then we've taken notes, framing our notes in the form of that text structure, but we still haven't done the hard work of identifying the main idea and the details that it supports. So looking back at the notes that you've written down, what do you think the author is really trying to say? What do you think the author is trying to say? Riley? It is saying weather is unpredictable, but what details does it provide for unpredictability? Does it really provide details that proves that it's unpredictable? It's talking about the causes, right? What causes unpredictable weather, right? Amelia, do you have a suggestion? Just forgot it. Anybody else? What do you think the author's trying to tell us in this whole section? Okay, the temperature around us can change the weather. All right, let's build on that a little bit. Is there anything that pops out at you, a sentence or something that pops out at you that has to do with what Claire just shared about the temperature causing the weather? Isabella? Okay, so it says that the sun heats large patches of land which warms the air above them. The wind then moves the warm air around, sometimes bumping cooler patches out of the way. The air's constant shifting, rising, falling, heating, and cooling make the weather very unpredictable. I'm going to read the whole thing again. This time, as you're listening to me read it, I want you to listen for what you think the main idea is. This page that I've just read to you, this text, the author is trying to tell you something very important. Okay? And guys, this work is hard because you have to sift through to determine the main idea and to determine the details. If you were going to teach somebody about this, what would you put in the palm of your hand as the main idea? And then what details would you give to support that main idea? Okay? And just to make a tie back to the writer's workshop we had today, remember how we tested? How we tested to see if our main ideas supported our thesis statement? So the work that you're doing here now is also going to impact your writing when you're writing your essay. So developing a way and a strategy of being able to determine main ideas and details is going to carry over into your writing. All right, so listen carefully. Sometimes the main idea can pop out at you and stand out as something important. Here comes the sun. The sun is Earth's 5 billion-year-old friend. How hot is it? Really hot. The sun has a core of gases that reaches a temperature of 27 million degrees Fahrenheit, or 15 million degrees Celsius. Here on Earth, we are 93 million miles, 150 million kilometers, away from the sun. But that's still close enough to feel the burn. The sun provides most of the heat and light for the planet, but it is not the only factor in the weather. All those millions of miles from the sun, our planet spins on an axis. The rotation causes moving air to change direction. Add more movement to air that is rising, falling, and changing temperatures, and you end up with a wild weather ride. When it comes to causing weather, the sun, land, and air are partners. The sun heats large patches of land, which warm the air above them. The wind then moves the warm air around, sometimes bumping cooler patches out of the way. The air's constant shifting, rising, falling, heating, and cooling make the weather very unpredictable. So what, this whole page, these 3 paragraphs, what is the author trying to tell you, or teach you, I should say? What is the author trying to teach you? Dylan?
The cause of weather.
What is the cause of the weather?
The sun and air and wind.
Okay, so can you see this sentence here? When it comes to causing weather, the sun, land, and air are partners. Okay? All right, now, identifying a sentence that pops out doesn't mean that we just copy it. We have to think about where are we going to put that in your own words. So really quickly, thinking about that sentence, I want you to write a main idea sentence that says that but without putting your own words. I'll read it to you again. When it comes to causing weather, the sun, land, and air are partners. So how could you write that in your own words? When it comes to causing weather, the sun, land, and air are partners. Somebody want to share what they wrote? Amelia?
The sun, land, and air work together to change the weather.
Okay. The sun, wind, and air work together to change the weather. Yes, right?
Elements work together to create weather.
Say it again.
Elements work together to create weather.
They do. Do you think it's important, though, to say what those elements are? It probably is, right? Because this is a scientific text, we don't just want to say elements work together. We want to name them. Nick? Help with what? Well, that's really not what it's saying that it helps with everyday needs. It's telling you that it causes weather. Isabella? Okay, the sun, wind, and land cause the weather. All right, so if we know that that's our main idea, that's what would be in the palm of our hand, right? That the sun, land, and air work together to cause the weather. What are some of the details that are important to support that? How could you teach somebody what that means? That the sun, the air, the land work together. How do you explain that? What did you learn? How does that happen? How do they work together? Connor? How? What does the sun do? It heats the air. All right. What does the land do? Okay, so let's go back and read it again. And guys, I want you to notice how many times I'm reading it again. Right? Reread, reread, reread. Every time you read, you notice something else. Every time you read, you have a different lens. Okay, so we're looking specifically this time on how the land, how the sun, and how the air impact the weather, how they work together. How do they work together? So you're going to want to jot down those three elements and talk about how they impact the weather. Here comes the sun. The sun is Earth's 5 billion year old friend. How hot is it? Really hot. The sun has a core of gases that reaches a temperature of 27 million degrees Fahrenheit or 15 million degrees Celsius. Here on Earth, we are 93 million miles, 150 million kilometers away from the sun. But that's still close enough to feel the burn. The sun provides most of the heat and light for the planet, but it is not the only factor in the weather. All those millions of miles from the sun, our planet spins on an axis. So that's the land, right? The planet is the land. The rotation causes moving air to change direction. Add more movement to air that is rising, falling, and changing temperatures, and you end up with a wild weather ride. When it comes to causing weather, the sun, land, and air are partners. The sun heats large patches of land which warm the air above them. The wind then moves the warm air around, sometimes bumping cooler patches out of the way. The air's constant shifting, rising, falling, heating, and cooling make the weather very unpredictable. Right? So how does the sun, the land, and the air work together to form weather? Connor, how does the sun? Yes, it heats the land, right? So because it heats the land, right, then the air above the land is warmer, right? It changes temperature. It gets warmer or colder, right? All right, what else? So we have the sun and we have the land. What else does the land do that's important? Change your mind? Okay, what else does the land do that's important? Levi? It spins on its axis, right? Okay, the fact that our planet spins on an axis is something else that the land does. It's spinning. So the sun is heating the air, heating the land, The land is heating the air, but the land is also spinning, and it's causing changes to what? What does all that heating and cooling and spinning do, Ava? It causes the weather, right? It causes the air to move differently, which causes the weather. Okay, so let's just go back and review what we've done here, okay? First, we identified the text structure. Hopefully you recognized at the very beginning when it talks all about the sun. This was sort of like trying to engage you and give you some facts. But it wasn't really about the main idea as much as the later paragraphs, okay? After we identified the text structure, we went back and we took notes, and we built our notes on the same text structure. We wanted to say it the same way. So we wanted to frame it in a cause and effect text structure. Then we went back again and we tried to say, what is the author trying to tell us with all of this information? What is the main idea? And then we went back again and said, okay, what are the details that support this main idea? So we've figured out that the weather is influenced by three things, right? What are the three things? Wind, land, and sun, okay? And we learned that they all work together to cause weather. And then we know that the sun heats the land. The land is spinning, which causes the movement of the air to change. Because when air temperatures change, they get cooler, they get hotter, the air is rising, okay? The air is, from the spinning of the axis, the air is moving, and that's how we get weather. Okay, now it does seem like a very long process, but it gets easier as you practice it. So today, during our work time, I want you to go back and look at the notes that you've taken on some of the topics you've read. Remember I told you, it's really important to have good notes on what you've read, to be applying the strategies that we've learned each day in Reader's Workshop so that you can now do the work that you need to do today. Now, if you didn't do that, if you didn't take good notes, if you didn't follow the steps that we've learned, then you're going to need to do it today with a piece of nonfiction text that you have in your bag. So you can do exactly what I did here. You can choose a small section of the text and practice the strategy today. Because when you get to the later parts of this unit of study, you're going to need to be able to do this in order to be an effective writer and teacher on the topic that you research. Okay, so go ahead and get started. And I'll be calling a few of you back to choose books because not everybody got a chance to.